Leaders hopefully do a lot of things right in your organization. However, we all know that leadership misconduct is on the rise. Unfortunately, it happens over and over again. The question is how you deal with that. How do you deal with leadership misconduct? We see more and more often that leaders do not do the right thing and often it ends up in press, which is of course not great. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the assumption of innocence? How do you deal with different people asserting different aspects or assuming different aspects or just putting different facts or opinions in the room, and you have to deal with all of that in your organization? There's a huge amount of public pressure, especially when you're a well-known brand. How to deal with that? Just to look into certain cases we had. When you, for example, look into Travis Kalanick, it's the CEO of Uber, Uber, the transportation company. He was accused of creating a toxic work culture. The investigation was led by the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder and ended with 47 counts where it was told that's where Uber has to change. And of course, Travis Kalanick had to resign. The resignation happened immediately afterwards, and he left the organization, wasn't seen back. But that's not the only case. When you look, for example, at Leslie Moonves, CBS, the termination happened, a $120 million severance package. When you look into the case of Steve Easterbrook at McDonald's, not reporting relationships, of course, when you are on board level, people need to know. And I know that some people claim, hey, it's a private matter. I don't want to make my relationships public. And of course, in many positions, you don't have to. But when you are the CEO of a stock exchange listed company, then people need to know if you are making decisions based on personal friendships or liaisons or whatever the relationship might be, or if you really make a decision based on facts, proof, evidence, and skill. People need to know that because there's a lot of money involved, and you can, of course, harm the whole and entire organization with misconduct in that case. Well, he didn't report relationships. He was fired without reason, got a severance package for that. But then McDonald's countersued him, got the vast majority of the package back. And the lawsuit happened because McDonald's found out or accused him of having multiple relationships and deleting evidence from his phone. They settled, and they settled with a $105 million repayment back to McDonald's. But of course, there are also cases that we have to deal with that as well, where people were accused and something very different happened. So, for example, Herbert Diess from Volkswagen in due course of Dieselgate. Remember when Volkswagen cheated with the emission scandal? Herbert Diess was accused of creating a hostile work environment. It went to court, and when you are a manager on that level, an executive on that level, when someone finds you guilty of creating a toxic work environment, it is quite hard to find a new job on that level because organizations aren't interested in that kind of leadership or pseudo-leadership in this case. However, Herbert Diess was fully acquitted. And that was the conclusion the court officially said. They said people either misrepresented facts or everything was very contradictory. Definitely nothing of what Herbert Diess was accused of happened. That's what the court said. That's not my opinion. I'm just quoting the court here. And we just had a recent case. Sony Music, the European chief, the European CEO, not in business anymore, is accused of toxic work environment, misconduct in different cases. The investigation is ongoing, so we don't know what's happening there. But Daniel Lieberberg is not in business anymore, so he already left the organization. We will see what the end of that will be. How do you deal with these moments? So first, when someone brings something up, anyone, and that is set in stone by either the constitution or the laws you have in your country, there's an assumption of innocence. When someone says A says B did something wrong, there's an assumption of innocence until they were proven guilty in court. You, of course, have to see, when people now make it public, do you have to react? When you are a well-known brand, you most likely have to. When you are a part of a public, when you are viewed in the public eye, when you are known to the general public, people expect you to say something. By the way, when you're a private person or when you are someone who is not part of the public discussion, you're not a well-known brand, you're not a global leader, then of course you don't have to answer, because just someone making something up or saying something does not mean that you have to react to anything. By the way, when you react, always be sure, because there are, of course, different kinds of reactions. You could, for example, immediately sue someone or counter-sue someone. Be aware of the Streisand effect. The Streisand effect, named after Barbara Streisand, happened a couple of years ago when a photographer went by helicopter along the coast of California, took pictures of different villas and mansions to show people, hey, this is how celebrities live. When you're a celebrity, you are part of the public discussion. And of course, some people didn't like that suddenly their villa popped up in public on a photographer's website. However, most people, to be precise, Everyone didn't do anything except Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand sued that photographer to take that photo down. However, under the rule of law, it is allowed to take these pictures. When you're in a helicopter, you can take these pictures. You're not stating anything that Google Maps doesn't say. And of course, these villas and mansions are high security places. You don't get anywhere near them, even if you try to do so without breaking the law. So there's no chance and no risk you get anywhere near the celebrity, even if you want to. It's very important here that as soon as Barbra Streisand started to sue the photographer, that's where the whole story took off. The picture of Barbra Streisand's mansion was downloaded less than 100 times up to the point when the lawsuit began. Then suddenly millions and millions of people downloaded exactly that image because it became so special, because it basically became a piece of need, and people said, I better have it before it's taken offline. And immediately anyone knew where Barbra Streisand lived, making it way worse. And of course it didn't end too well from a PR point of view for Barbra Streisand here. That's called the Streisand effect. When you sue someone, when you make a big drama out of that with no reason or for no reason, it can immediately be held against you, and be sure that some people will do that. So ask professionals what to do here. And by the way, it is perfectly fine when you say, I didn't do it, or it's not true. When someone accuses you of something and you want to give comment, you can simply say, no, not true. And that's all. You do not have to justify yourself in front of people making stuff up. When you are of the opinion they made it up, you just say, it's absurd, it's not true, full stop, end of story. And that is enough. It is not that you have to prove the opposite. There's a concept called Russell's teapot. When you ever looked into philosophy, you probably came across that. Russell's teapot means that someone says, look, there's a teapot circling around, flying around the sun. Prove the opposite. And of course, anyone of a sane mind will now say, well, with the size of the sun, it's a bit challenging to find an object as small as a teapot, isn't it? Yes, correct. And that's why in science and anywhere else, you have to prove the statements you make. When you say a teapot flies around the sun, you have to prove it. It's not that someone else has to prove that it's not the case. You can always see that someone has no evidence when they say, oh, you have to prove that it's not the case. That is the weakest argument, usually stated by people who are reasonably not very well educated, or people who are very desperate for attention, have no arguments on their side. And these people are usually keyboard warriors on social media or worse. So you don't have to prove the opposite. When you say untrue, full stop, that's the end of communication, and it's perfectly fine. How do you now, as an organization, put everything in place to prevent these things from happening? So first, your leaders need to be professionally trained. Constantly professionally trained. Training, coaching, seminars, workshops, anything you need there. And by the way, don't tell me you don't have time for that, because you probably do not want to spend time on scandals you then have to deal with due to leadership misconduct. You need to have time for that. There is no discussion around that. If you do not do that, and just to tell you the fact again, the Chartered Management Institute, CMI, a global organization, published a study where 82% of leaders said they had 0 minutes of leadership training or coaching. 0 minutes. So they are leaders with 0 qualification. Let's just say you are a company. And as a company, you probably produce goods. And when you produce goods, these goods need to be manufactured properly. And let's say you have someone who is welding something. Let's say electrowelding, special procedure, you need to learn that. And I would stand in front of your door and say, I watch a lot of YouTube videos. Can I just be an electrowelder with you? Can I just do welding with you? You would never say, oh, you just grab these things and do welding there. You will figure it out somehow. You would never say that for many reasons, because you are liable for all the accidents, for all the damaged products, for any harm given by them or done by them. And you would always say, we have to train people first. For whatever reason, people think that leadership doesn't need to be trained. And that is a core mistake. And by the way, it's a beginner's mistake. When people need to learn something, they need to be taught. And that's not even you. That is 101 knowledge on basically anything. Anything you know, you learn somehow. When you say, hey, leadership, we do learning by doing, of course, you can do that. Then people do things wrong. And of course, you damage people. You probably have people leaving. You damage the organization. You damage the employer brand, probably for years, maybe decades. And then you have to spend tons of money on recruiting if anyone still wants to work for you. Good luck with that. Not even talking about marketing, PR, spin doctors you need, any kind of communication to the outward world. Good luck with that. It's very important that you see that professional training comes first for your leaders, but that's not enough. You also need to train them properly how to deal with power. And it is difficult to deal with power in both directions. Often people, for example, in large corporations claim, oh, my leader doesn't make any decisions anymore. So they always escalate to the next level. They always delegate someone. No one wants to make any decisions anymore. They are all too afraid of that. So they use too little power. And they need to learn how to use the right amount of power. But there are also leaders on the exact other side of the spectrum where they use way too much power, where they misuse power, create a toxic work environment, threaten people. And by the way, when you still say, hey, people today are just too soft, that was never a solution. You can never say it's the people's fault because it never is. Never, in 0 cases. So you have to end one thing. You have to end the practice where you say, hey, this person comes from a worldwide known university. So with their first job, they are senior vice president of XYZ. You're making a joke out of yourself. And by the way, when you now say, hey, we have someone and they want to work for us and they are a great talent and I really can't give them a junior position because they don't want to have their junior position, create a training program, a mentoring program around that. Tell them, hey, we have a program for you. You get the SVP title. However, you get into the position in due course of 3 years. You also tell that amongst your staff, where people simply know, hey, someone's here and they get trained on the job. So not just another theoretical person jumping on some bandwagon that the manager before them told them because they don't know what they do there. Or of course, another problem is that people say, hey, just because you have that degree and a bit of nepotism, cronyism around that with other people coming from that uni, you suddenly are a senior manager here. No one takes you seriously. No one takes you seriously. So you need a proper mentoring, development, training program for the people and teach them how to use power properly. What you also need is very clear guidelines. These guidelines must include, first, a safe space rule. People have the right that when they go to work, their safety and security, mentally and physically, is not harmed in any way. And again, it's never the employee's fault. Second, when there are any kind of accusations, people have the right to use a channel where they anonymously or confidentially at least can report these misconducts. Because when you do not have these channels, people go to press. That's what happened in all the cases I named before. People ignored the difficulties. They ignored the challenges. It happened with KPMG as well when Bill Michael in the UK as their chairman lost their job. People complain and the answer was, yeah, it's not great, his behavior, we know, a bit difficult, the person, but we talk with him, I guess, but he's important for the business, so we can't do anything. And then people escalated it, put it to the Guardian. It went viral, and immediately Bill Michael had to leave. So be aware that you need these channels where people can communicate, and then you have to act and see, is it true or is it not true? Because what you also have to do is you have to practice the assumption of innocence. Then, of course, you check if things are right or wrong. If something's right and they did something wrong, then sanctions must be in place that have to be appropriate towards what they have done wrong. They have to be in a certain relation, a certain proportion to what they have done wrong. And of course, you have to show clear consequences. We have to get away from the over and over again appearing aspect of someone showed massive misconduct, a C-level person, and as a result, they get a severance package of millions of dollars, and then they often have their contract not terminated, but the contract goes on for a couple of years, but they don't have to show up at work, so they somehow are released from work but still get paid. You know what you communicate with that when you tell people we release them from their duties but the contract goes on, people will say, look, I prefer that option as well. Could you just give me the money without work? That sounds like a pretty good deal. And you're giving a bad example there. I sometimes wonder how spineless people on board level, executive level, or supervisory boards must be who agree to these terms. Do you all just pay yourself money to be happier with your decisions? Because when someone shows gross misconduct, wild misconduct, the right answer is fired without notice or fired with regular notice within 30 days. And that's the end of the matter. No pay, no nothing. It gets better very slowly, but be sure with the fact of how you deal with these instances and these examples of leadership misconduct, people remember that for a very long time. And when they see, oh, people can get away with that, they will remember that as well, and they will behave accordingly. Bringing all that together, you need clear rules, unambiguously clear rules. You need very clear knowledge, which means training, coaching, whatever you need to train your leaders properly. And you need an unambiguously clear implementation that people know what's accepted, what's not accepted, and anyone knows where are the boundaries and everyone works within them. If you do that, your organization is in the best place, in a safe space. And that's where any proper, successful, sustainably successful organization belongs. When you now say, oh, that sounds complicated. Yeah, it's not too easy. I agree. It is quite a bit of work. Feel free to text me about that. By the way, this episode here happened because of emails I received. Of course, every email I receive is strictly confidential. Feel free to send me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. I also mentioned my email address and my LinkedIn in the show notes of this podcast. Feel free to text me there. I'm always looking forward to hearing from you with ideas for content and anything else in that direction. And of course, what is also very important is when you now say, hey, do you have more? Maybe my leader wants to have an article from you, or do we have live sessions? Yes, we do. Go to expert.nb-networks.com. When you put your email address in there, you only receive one email per week, 100% content, ad-free guarantee. And then you can join our live sessions. When these sessions happen, usually we have one session a month. When these sessions happen, as always mentioned in the expert letter, you also get free access to all the articles I publish, to all the podcasts I have, everything at no charge for our listeners and readers. And only there you find the access to the live sessions. There is no other way to access them. So I'm looking forward to being in contact with you there. However, the third aspect is the most important one. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change in your organization. And that is the positive change that you want to see and want to have in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. I'm available for help 24/7, so feel free to contact me anytime. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.